Theodora sat very still for a moment, looking at him, struck by his insight. I shouldn't be surprised, she told herself, not by the fact that an indigene can see so clearly, at any rate. I've spent far too much time in the past to think our ancestors were any less wise or insightful than we are, and this man was one of the smartest and most influential of his own time. But it's still odd the way that he's guiding the conversation. That degree of self-confidence in someone wrenched out of his own time, buried in the wonders of another, is, well, it's remarkable. That's what it is. I appreciate your concern for me, Mr. Pepys, she said, letting him hear the sincerity in her tone. But be that as it may, I still have a job to do. Of course. Pepys leaned back in his chair. Please do not allow my questions to impede you. She raised the cup once more, then paused and set it back down without drinking. As you may already know, this is your last interview with Art, she said. So I had apprehended. He frowned. I understand, of course, that I do not truly belong here, and that this is neither my time nor my world. And it is also true that obligations and responsibilities in plenty await my return to them. Yet true though all of that may be, it will be most difficult to return to my own time after I have beheld so many wonders and encountered so many fascinating people. Would that it were not necessary for me to depart, yet I understand that I must. I'm sorry? Theodora's eyebrows arched. I trust that my departure need not be too abrupt, Pepys said, and smiled. I am engaged upon a game of chess with Dr. Clifton, and I should like to finish it before I must bid him adieu. Mr. Pepys, we're not taking you back. I beg your pardon, he blinked. I had assumed... No one told you that already? No. He sat for a moment, clearly thinking hard, then leaned toward her. Am I to apprehend that I need not return after all? You don't want to? God's heart, Dr. Beckett! What man with the wit to get him in out of the rain would choose to return to the time from whence I came when all of this, he flung his arms wide, awaits him here? In that cottage, he pointed directly at the building, resides a familiar spirit, one of your marvelous machines that provides greater variety of food and drink in a single afternoon than a man of my London might experience in a lifetime. Indeed, I might well spend a lifetime sampling them all. And that is but the first and the smallest of the wonders that spring to mind. No, madam, of all the things my heart might crave, returning to what and whence I once was is not among them. Some people find the transition to the 30th century difficult to handle, Theodora said, and he laughed. I doubt you not, doctor, but, in riposte, some people are not Samuel Pepys. Yes, I can see that, she acknowledged with a chuckle. Believe me, dear lady, upon my most solemn oath, I do not wish to return. Well, I guess that's fortunate, since you'll be staying anyway. Indeed? He cocked his head again. What then becomes of those you've taken from their own time? Typically, we keep historical figures here in isolation while we conduct interviews. Then we transfer them to the retirement home. It's another facility, very similar to this one, but with more privacy, without all of those questions about your diaries, for example, and much greater access to our info systems, to live out the rest of their lives in comfort. I see you are in earnest. I can indeed remain if I wish. It's not simply a matter of what you wish, Mr. Pepys. She shook her head, her expression more sober. The truth is that you can't go back. Can't, he repeated, and his brow creased. You speak as if it were a thing physically impossible and not merely the letter of your law. You have your vessels to sail through time, do you not? Am I to apprehend that even possessing such craft, it is not possible for you to return me to the time and the place where first you found me? I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that's true. Pepys sat back, rubbing his chin. Fascinating. I had assumed otherwise. Well, technically we could return you. We used to think we couldn't, but even though we can now, we're not allowed to, and for very good reason. And now I fear my perplexity is complete, he said. Sorry, she said again. I didn't mean to confuse you. So I am to understand that while it would be possible for you to return me, mind you, I have no desire to be returned, you would refuse. Would it be impertinent to inquire why? She smiled apologetically, it's complicated, shall we say. That I do not doubt for an instant, he assured her with a crooked smile. Yet I would like to understand, if that be possible. Chronometric physics isn't the easiest topic to comprehend. If such be true, Dr. Beckett, it is most fortunate that I should have so lovely a woman to serve as tutor. Mr. Pepys, she shook her head, grinning, you do realize I've read your diary? Indeed, he gave her a sly look. In its entirety? Well, excerpts. The most salacious bits, certainly. Ah, I see. He shook his head. I was advised by Master Dryden that the Quill brother, one whom you would call a writer, Doctor, should never commit to the written word what one would prefer the world not learn. Once written, he warned me, words too often escape the paddock in which their author thought them safely pent. 'Twould seem to be he had the right of it, and so I find myself most gravely disadvantaged, dear lady. Yet that does not sway me from the point. If you would, of your grace, essay the task and seek to enlighten my darkness, I should feel myself yet more deeply in your debt. Theodora pursed her lips, then tapped them with a finger, then quirked a sly grin. All right, then. We're done with your interviews, really, so there's no harm in it. And I don't have anything else to do today. Let's see how long you last before your head explodes. In sooth? Pepys swallowed, his eyes wide, and she chuckled. No, not in sooth, Mr. Pepys. It was a joke. I'll be back in a moment. She stepped into the cottage, ordered a knife and a half-meter-long piece of rope from the printer, and returned to the table under the tree. Rope? He asked, raising one eye. It's a visual aid. She held out the cord, gripping it between both hands, and stretched it taut. This represents the timeline. She gazed at him, her own eyebrows arched, until he nodded in comprehension. This is where we are, here, at the end of the rope. She waved one hand, and the end of the rope it held. We call this point the edge of existence, or the true present. It doesn't matter which term you use; they're interchangeable. It's called that because this is as far as a time machine can go. Indeed, and that limit exists because there's no future beyond that point. It hasn't happened yet, so we can't go there. Ah! Understanding brightened those intense dark eyes, and he nodded. Yet I perceive your length of cord has two ends, not one, he observed in a suggestive tone, and it was her turn to nod. Indeed it does, and the other end of the rope, here, she moved her other hand in a circle, is the Big Bang. I cry pardon. Big Bang? It's what we call an enormous explosion that spawned the multiverses. Don't worry about it for now. Just think of it as the beginning of time. So, these are the two endpoints of time as we know it, although this example is horribly out of scale. Now, place your finger on the true present. He nodded and laid an index finger next to her hand at one end of the rope. Your finger now represents a time machine, she told him. You just boarded it. Take it back in time. He traced his finger along the rope until he reached the middle. Stop, she commanded, and he did. You're now in the past. Let's do something there. Strum the rope. He flicked the cord with his finger. It vibrated for a few moments, then settled back into motionlessness. That's what time travel is like, she said. You can go back and interact with the past, but anything you do, any changes you make, don't affect the timeline. The past is immutable. We had empirical proof of that because we could go back and retrieve an object or a person from the past. But if we returned to that point in time, the object or the person was still there. She or it had never disappeared, never been affected in any way, so clearly any change we wrought was purely transitory. Or so we thought. Pepys nodded slowly. So, assuming I have followed you aright, whilst I may be here in the true present, I also remain in the past, because that past flowed on unchanging, even though I was drawn forth from it? Precisely, she beamed at him, surprised and pleased to see him catch on so quickly. Most interesting. He scrunched up his face and stared at the rope. So, if I apprehend correctly, one of your time vessels might return to that time in my past, or one later still, and fetch a second Pepys hither. Right again, and we've done that a few times when artifacts were damaged during recovery, or when the shock of transplantation cracked an abductee's mind, she added silently. And is there any limit to this phenomenon? Pepys asked. Not that we're aware of. Then there would be no reason why you might not make that same voyage again and yet again, travel back into the past, however so often it pleased you, and acquire one Samuel Pepys after another.